You know, one of the greatest pitfalls in a marriage relationship, and some of you may not have even thought of this, is the lack of respect and restraint. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. And I remember, I think it was a couple of years into our marriage, we were coming home on the Illinois Tollway. How many of you have ever been on the Illinois Tollway? Okay? It's not a road that I really like to be on, okay? And we were coming home from a weekend in Wisconsin, and it seemed like everybody was going the same direction that we were going, back to Chicago. And we lived in a suburb about 20 miles west of Chicago, and the traffic was horrendous. So we're driving along, and suddenly I saw what I believed would be a great shortcut. And I started heading across the traffic, aiming for this shortcut. And my wife didn't know what was going on.
Well, if you knew my husband, he always wanted to get where he was going as quick as possible. Now, is that a man thing or what? Okay, there's some of you that understand this, right? Both male and female. Well, of course, we were in the far left lane. It was 5 lanes going our direction. And we were in the far left lane. And I knew that when he got to the next lane over and didn't weave back, work, because he kind of, do these things in and out. When we weren't going back into the fast lane again, and I could sense he was going to go off the interstate, the tollway, and I saw this big exit. And I looked at him, I said, honey, do you know where you're going?
Now, why would a woman ever ask her husband if he knows where he's going? I mean, well, you understand. Well, I answered, we've learned a lot of things over the years, but one of the things that I didn't understand then was how much pride I had in my heart. And men don't like to be wrong, do we? I don't think women like to be wrong either. But how do you think I answered that question? Do you know, honey, do you know where you're going? Of course I know where I'm going. I mean, what kind of a question is that? Well, I didn't have a clue where I was going, except that it was the honesty of it, okay? Because I wasn't in the habit of lying, but the honesty of it was that it was going in the right direction for a shortcut to get us home quicker than the Illinois Tollway.
Well, we drove for a little while on this shortcut, and of course I didn't recognize anything around, so I made a simple suggestion that maybe it would be good if we stopped at a gas station and asked somebody for directions.
That's a pretty basic question, right? But again, how do men typically respond to that kind of a question? Well, fortunately, at this point, there were no gas stations, okay?
We'd already passed those.
We passed the gas stations. And, I should have been respectful of my wife. See, what you don't know is that my wife is one of these people that has a keen sense of direction. You can take her somewhere in the daytime if she's paying attention, and she can get you back there 20 years later. Now that is phenomenal in a sense of direction. I'm just the opposite. When I'm driving along, unless I am being told to take notes about the directions, I'm just visiting and enjoying the scenery. And if I had to go back and retrack that route, not my natural gift to do that. But back in those early years of marriage, instead of really respecting those differences and those strengths, that was antagonistic to me. So I didn't respect her as I should have in that. I should have asked her, you think this is a good shortcut, honey? And I didn't restrain my natural selfish way. I just did what I wanted to do.
Well, I suggested again that maybe we needed to find out where we're going, because this shortcut we took actually started off very nice. It was 4 lanes, 2 lanes going our way and 2 lanes coming back. So it looked like a fairly decent road. But by this time, the 4 lanes were gone, and we were down to a 2-lane traffic with a line between the road. And so I said, honey, are you sure you know where you're going?
Well, by this point, I wasn't feeling real confident. So I said, honey, get the map out. she's good with the map. So she got the map out, and
Well,
then what happened?
I looked at the map, and I do enjoy maps. And so I was reading this map. We had an older map, unfortunately, and this was a new road on the far northwestern side of Chicago. And it didn't match, what was on the map. I kept looking out the window and trying to see signs and relate it to the map. And I finally said, honey, I can't find out where we are on the map.
Ah, now I can blame her. You see, that's what human nature wants to do. It started clear back with Adam and Eve. Who taught Eve and Adam in that situation to start blaming each other and blaming God? And so here I was. She couldn't find it on the map, so it's her fault now. Well, the Lord is very good, because that road that started out 4 lanes, divided highway, went down to 2 lanes, line down the middle, went down to a blacktop, no line down the middle, went down to a narrow blacktop, went down to a gravel road, went down to cornfield. Stopped. Dead end. Now, does God know how to humble us, men? Here's this ringing in my ears. Honey, do you know where you're going? Are you sure you know where you're going? Well, God knew where I was going, and God knew that I didn't have the kind of respect and restraint that I needed to have in a marriage relationship. And God helped me see something that day that my wife wasn't able to show me.
Now, the problem was, not only did we dead end in a cornfield, but by this time, we were both very much responding in our human nature, not respecting each other and not certainly listening to the Lord for a better way and a better solution. So he was chastising me for my inability to read a map. And, I have the ability to be very sarcastic. And I chose not to use that approach because he was already fairly heated. And I found that if he's heated and I'm heated, the fire gets very hot quick. So I just went into one of those indifferent Cold War modes. I won't speak to him. And neither one of us found peace in that situation. Neither one of us. Because neither one of us were practicing respect for our spouse and restraint in ourselves.
You know what I began to understand, and I wish I could say I understood this all really quick in the marriage relationship, but I began to understand something about men. We have a tendency to have a slothful respect and appreciation for the things that our wife does for us. And at the same time, while we have this slothful lack of giving appreciation and really appreciating the things they've done, coupled with that, we have a strong tendency to have high expectations on them, demands that we want them to meet, while we don't appreciate the things that they already do. I liken it to the Adam and Eve situation because, see, what I thought of is I wanted my wife, my dear bride, to be Eve, right? The perfect, she's going to be everything for me. That's my expectation. Never occurred to me that I was nothing at all like Adam. Just never occurred to me. That's because who was I thinking of? I wasn't really thinking of her and really restraining myself. I was thinking from that me focus again.
We share this example because almost every couple can identify with it. And we can chuckle and we can laugh. But that day, we weren't laughing. And if you're experiencing that type of conflict in your marriage, the lack of respect and restraint, and where that leads, whether it's a driving situation or not, that type of conflict doesn't make us laugh. It makes us cry inside. It's very, very hurtful and very damaging. So we share this because we want you to know that there's hope. That God can take any of us, no matter where we are, or how much we've blundered, or how selfish we are, and He can turn us around if we have a willingness to allow Him to work in our heart. And even if it's not all that willing, we can say, Lord, would you make me willing? Because right now, I've proved through weeks, months, and years of doing it my way that I'm not happy that way. And all that does is cause great stress in the home. I wanted to be a happy homemaker. I wanted to have a rich and fulfilling marriage. And I started off on the wrong channel to get that. So God wants us to turn that through His power.
You know, many times, again, I'll speak to the men, many times we have what I call accrued authority. And what that simply means is if I can't get my wife to do it any other way, I know this verse in Ephesians 5:22 that says, "Wives, submit yourselves therefore unto your husband." I didn't get the last part, as unto the Lord. I left that off. But when all else would fail, can you imagine that? I'm embarrassed to say that, but I only say it to you because I'm not there in my marriage relationship anymore. God is a God that can change us if we will come to Him. And so I used to use that. If all else failed, I would throw that at my wife. You think that's very impressive on a wife? What's she supposed to do? Submit herself to what I want in my self-nature. I knew the verse that just a couple verses down in verse 25 of that same chapter, Ephesians 5. I knew what it said there too. And my wife dared not to tell me that there at that point it says, "Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church," and did what? Gave Himself. You know, that is the kind of authority that really ranks high in God's kingdom.
Amen.
Is when we love our wives enough to give ourselves to them the way Christ gave Himself and continues to minister to us. You know, I was driving down the road one day. I'm a real estate broker. When I moved out of my medical profession, when we moved out to the mountains of Montana where we've lived for the last 17 years, I went into real estate and specialized in country and mountain properties. And I took people to see some very remote properties, very remote. And I was out one day with a couple. They were driving in their vehicle, pickup truck, and I was sitting there in the passenger seat. The wife was sitting in the middle. The husband was driving in their vehicle. And we're driving along, and, you know, men often in those situations, you know, out showing property, looking at property together, and men can get into some conversations and get a little bit oblivious. Well, this dear wife was sitting in the middle, and up ahead, she saw a rock on the way to this remote property out in the middle of the road. And being a very kind and loving wife, she simply said to her husband, "Honey, there's a rock in the road." Now, wasn't that nice? Wives, wasn't that nice? How do you think the husband responded? Well, I'll tell you what he said. "Who's driving? I mean, don't you think I got eyes or what?" Now, was he respecting the intentions of his wife? Was he restraining his own impetuous spirit? Now, how do you think that affected his wife? I watched that poor woman who was simply trying to save the transmission or tearing up the oil pan. That's all she was trying to do, be a kind, loving wife. She wilted. She just, her countenance just dropped. Now I want to ask you something. You think she talked much after that? Now, on the way back, and this didn't happen, but I want to use this. On the way back, supposing that we had hit that rock that we went around, because she didn't say anything, what would her husband say to her then? "Why didn't you tell me there was a rock in the road?" Right? Is that a hard position to put a woman in? It's a very difficult place to be in because she can't do it right. And that is not proper respect and restraint.
When we recognize that we were lacking in this area, and because of that lack, having conflict, and heartache and contention. We took these words as God began to show us, you're not really respecting your husband, or you're not willing to restrain your emotions or your words or your thoughts. This lack of respect and restraint, we were challenged to go back and look up to see what it really meant. Because sometimes we see things in a narrow perspective. So I want to share with you Webster's definition of respect and see if it doesn't take a broader meaning. But I want to share it in the first person, speaking from myself to my husband. So when you hear it, you think of it and you hear it with ears from yourself to your husband or from yourself to your wife. It means that I will regard him with pleasure. Now think about the situations you come into that would typically cause conflict. If you would immediately have respect, that means you would regard your husband with pleasure, that I look favorably on him, and that I esteem him with real worth. His ideas, his suggestions, his leadership, his decisions, all of these things I esteem with real worth. Wow, what a difference that began to make in our home.
Well, let's look at respect in light of 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. True respect will be kind, not just to everyone else out there, not just kind to the store clerk or kind to the employee. True respect will show kindness to our spouse. It seeketh not its own way, and it suffers long. You know, it's a sad thing, but in many marriages, and it used to be this way in my marriage, the person that I had the least tolerance for was the one that I professed to love the most. This ought not to be. It's not that way anymore because God is able to change us if we'll really allow him to.
Amen.
But true respect suffers long with those that we love.
So now let's look at the word restraint, because they go hand in hand. If I truly respect my husband, if you truly respect your spouse, then you're willing to allow God to restrain you. So the word restraint here means that I will hold back or hinder any action or motion that's going to have a negative influence in our relationship. That means I have to deal with my thoughts, the mental. I have to deal with the physical, not just our words, but our countenance. Even my reactions have to be restrained in the Lord. You've had situations happen, and your natural impulse just wants to fly out, doesn't it? It may not be in words, it can be in reactions or demeanor. And even our passions will be restrained in the Lord, so that those passions never hurt our spouse.
Let's look at restraint in the light of 1 Corinthians 13. It will not be easily provoked. That means we need to have more God-given, grace-given tolerance for the one we love than the ones out there that we give so much to. And it does not behave itself unseemly. How do your children see you in the marriage relationship? Do they see the restraint in the home? Do they see the respect for one another? Because what they're seeing in the home is going to be a part of who they are more than what they hear you tell them to be in the home. It's what they really experience there. Is there genuine restraint there?
I'd like to share an experience that started before we were married that has been sprinkled throughout our marriage of 23 years. When we were discussing all of the plans for our future lives together, you know how it is, you cover all these little topics, and one of the topics we covered was, when we're married, would we have pets? Any of you all discussed that before you're married? Would we have pets? I mean, that's just a common area that we have to work through, because growing up, you know, I grew up in a home in suburbia, and we had a cat, and I really love cats. In fact, they are my favorite animal.
Big ones and little ones.
Big ones and little ones. My husband...
We have mountain lions in our area.
I love them too. My husband grew up on a farm, and of course, his favorite animal was a dog. And I don't know if it's a male-female thing or if it's suburbia country thing, but anyway, we were obviously at odds on would we have a pet, what we would have. he told me, well, yeah, we could get a cat, but on the farm, they never came in the house. They were always left out in the barn to keep the mice population at a low population. And I found that quite disgusting, actually, because I would never think I'd want my cat to eat a mouse. I mean, they're kind of gross, you know. So anyway, we were already disagreeing. So in this discussion, we found a solution. Well, we were both young. We were 23 when we got married, nearly 24, and we were both busy working full time, so we decided not to have any pets. But then when we had children, if we had a little girl, we would have what? A cat, right? And if we had a son, we would have a dog. And that seemed like a very reasonable solution. So in time, we had our first child, and her name was Allison. And I was so excited because I thought, we got a girl. And this little girl, you can just picture him growing up to be taller. Wouldn't that be so precious that she's going to have a little kitten all of her own? And so I approached my husband about this. We're going to get a cat for Allison. Now, was it really for Allison? Anyway, we didn't get one because he didn't remember the conversation at all.
Well, can I say something here?
Sure, dear.
You see, she remembers this conversation before we got married. And I told her, I said, honey, I know you love cats, and I don't know, maybe you thought about it a lot and you just had a dream that we had this conversation so you could have a cat, but I don't remember ever having this conversation. Now I have to tell you, as we've shared this various places, that it does sound like a more and more familiar story as she keeps telling it.
Well, when he didn't remember it, of course, that was very upsetting to me because I could remember where we were sitting and having the discussion. It was so clear to me. Well, obviously, we didn't agree. And we found ourselves into turmoil because he didn't remember and I did. And of course, I'm right. I mean, and of course, he's right. And you can't have two people being right when they're on opposite ends of understanding. So then we had our second child, and her name was Emily. And we still didn't get a cat because we had conflict over this. We did have a son eventually, 5 years later, and his name is Josiah. But we still didn't get any pets because we weren't in a position to really be able to have a pet at that time. So I can remember now as the children were getting older, and of course my desire was still to have a cat. And of course I do remember this conversation taking place. And so we would go to the store, like a Kmart or a grocery store or Walmart. You know, they have these little cardboard boxes outside. And the girls were so little, and I'd be sure to take them right up to the boxes and help them see inside. Because inside those boxes, you know what were there? These little irresistible fuzzball kittens. So cute. And the girls said, oh, Mommy, we want a kitty. And I'd say, you know, honey, we can't really take one home, but let's just love them up here. Because God was starting to work in my heart about learning how to respect my husband. So then I taught my children how to read. And one day, sure enough, we went to town. By this time, we're in Montana. Took them to town, went to the Walmart, and there's a box that was very familiar through the years to see. It had those big black felt letters on it. It said what? Free kittens, right? And my girl said, Mother, these kittens are free. It's just, they've always been free. They just never knew it. And so I said, you know, they are free, but honey, it's just not going to work for us to have a kitten right now. We have other things, and it's not really going to work out. So let's just love them up here, and we'll put them back, and then somebody will come and get them who has time to take care of them. Now, I share this because all through their lives, our children never knew that mother and father had conflict in this area. Because I never told them it's because father didn't want to have a cat. I was learning even then, as feebly as it was, to not say, well, it's fine with me and I really want to have one. Go talk to your father. It's his problem. Now, I share this because women do this. They use their children to get what they want from daddy. And I've even talked with women who will actually bring that kitten home and just love it up. And then Daddy comes home from work, and then what happens? All the children run to the door with great enthusiasm. Daddy, Daddy, look what we got in town today. And he sees this cat. And where's the wife? Where's the mother?
Hiding.
Is she out there? Honey, guess what we got in town today? Oh, no, she's not there. She's feeling a bit guilty. And guilt comes because we don't have peace with God. She didn't have peace with God because she didn't respect her husband. And so she used, well, honey, it was the children wanted the kitten. I got it for the children. And so the children become a wedge then that start to drive husband and wife apart. Let's not ever use our children to solve our differences. Let's learn how to allow God to help us to respect the desires and the wishes of our spouse, and to restrain our natural desires and inclinations, that we can find joy and peace and harmony. And so it really turned out not to be conflicting at all. And our children first found out that we each had a different preference when they heard this message on respect and restraints. Years later, as they were all in their teens. I can tell you that we do have a dog now, and I love her very much. Her name's Princess.
Let's talk about solutions. Number one, cultivate a spirit of kindness. Is that complicated? Cultivate a spirit of kindness. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted." You know, if we would take that one principle and bring it into the marriage, I'm sure you're kind to the people of your church. I'm sure you're kind to the people you work with. But God is asking us to be kind and tender-hearted here in the marriage relationship to the one that He's given us. I remember when Montana got its speed law for 55 miles an hour. You know that federal speed law that everybody got all over the country? Well, Montana did not like that. Montana is one of these kind of still independent-minded kind of places. A lot of independent-minded people there, too. Anyway, they said when this law, if this law ever gets repealed, we're going to go back to reasonable and prudent for our speed here in Montana. Sure enough, I remember the day that law was repealed. The next day, the speed limit signs were coming down off the highways between our home and Kalispell, Montana. It was a day of rejoicing in Montana for those that enjoyed going a little faster than 55 miles an hour, because Montana is a wide open state, okay? Just wide open. And the Corvette Club neighboring Idaho called and said, "Can we come over and bring our club over and enjoy your state?" Because, you know, here we now took our speed limit signs down, and when you entered Montana, it said, "Speed limit, reasonable and prudent, drive according to conditions." Well, they said, "No, you can't bring your Corvette Club over. It's not unlimited speed. It's just reasonable and prudent." So I remember one day as we were driving to town together, I was driving at what I considered a very reasonable and prudent speed. Very dry roads, blue sky day, beautiful. And my wife just quietly said to me, "Honey, would you mind slowing down a little bit?" Now, I have to admit to you, when she said that to me, I had one of those little thoughts like, who's driving? But there's good news in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in this case, there was a little verse that came to my mind. It's found in James 1:19. It says, "Let every man be swift to hear and slow to speak and slow to wrath." Now, I've known that verse since I was a boy, but God has helped me to recognize that that's a verse that can be made practical. Because I used to be very quick to speak and very slow to really hear and very quick to get irritated. So God spoke to me. The Holy Spirit called to me. Instead of saying to my wife, "Who's driving?" No, the Lord put a watch on my lips And the Lord gave me a better answer for my wife. And I want to challenge you men tonight, ladies too, but it's easier for me sometimes to challenge the men. God, if we will give him a chance, can give us a better response for our wife than that quick, irritable response, that quick, off-the-cuff sarcasm. God wants to give us a better answer. And so I didn't respond what initially popped up inside of me. I said, Lord, what would you have me to do? And here's the solution that the Lord gave me. Cultivating kindness for my wife. It's not an audible voice, just the thought that God brought through my conscience, that still, small voice. The Lord said, when your wife is with you, drive a speed that makes it comfortable for her to be with you so that she can enjoy the time together. How does that sound? That was what the Lord put in my heart. Then he went on and he said, and when you're alone, then you can drive a speed that we are comfortable with. Isn't the Lord good?
Well, when he shared that with me, my heart was touched because I knew he was doing it for me. He was thinking about us and our relationship, our marriage, and he was respecting my comfort level, and he was willing to restrain himself through Christ. But what was even more meaningful was when he put the second half on there. And when I'm not in the car, he was willing to drive according to what God and he were comfortable with. And that, to me, sent a very deep message to my heart of how much he really cared about me. Because there have been times in our past when I could be just as concerned about him in the car, whether I was in there or not, just being at home, I would be praying for his safety, because he did like to drive fast. And it's not that we were so opposite. I mean, I wasn't wanting to go 55 either, but we weren't that far apart. But it was interesting to see how God has a solution when we're willing to take a simple principle like cultivating kindness, being kind one toward another, and tender-hearted. That's how respect and restraint grows. Being kind, cultivating acts of kindness in the littlest things. Now, there's many things I could share with you, but the one is, oh, go ahead, dear, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to share one other thing about leadership. Since I shared with you how my leadership at times was very aggressive and selfish, what I found that true leadership, true manliness, and true authority, first of all, comes from God. And how can you tell if it's true leadership and true authority and true manliness? Because in every case, those who are in that position, me as a father, as a husband, as a man, I will always look to serve those that I love under God. That's the best leaders in the world. The best leaders in the world, the most successful leaders in the world, who are truly successful, know how to enter in to the people that work under them. And in this case, I'm talking about what we can do in our own homes as a man, as a Christian man, as a husband, and as a father. We can be looking for how we can best serve the one that God has given us.
Cultivating kindness. There's many things that, the Lord has impressed me with, and I'll just share one that happened in the last 2 weeks, because that's a very current experience, a very current example. We have 3 young people. Our children are 17, 20, and 22, and they all have jobs outside of the home. So that means that mother and father are home now without our children most of the time. And when the children were home, we had regular meal times, and we always ate together as a family, which we still do. We eat early in the morning to accommodate their schedule, and so we can still have that family time. And that was very important, but sometimes in the busyness of life, and now that I don't have all my children in the home helping me do the things in the home, and we still have the ministry full time, sometimes I get very busy, and I forget about the meal preparation because I'm just kind of absorbed in what I'm doing. The other day I went down to the office, to my husband's office, which is in our bedroom, and I said, honey, what would you like for lunch? We usually eat our second meal at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and so it was 1:30, and I'm thinking, I've got a half an hour, and it just became aware that, I wasn't hungry, I just happened to glance at the clock. And he says, oh, anything. I says, do you feel like cereal and fruit? That's really easy. We can do that in a half an hour, right? Wash a little fruit and put it on the table, get a couple bowls out, a couple boxes of cereal and some milk, and we can go. That can be a 10-minute prep. And he says, yeah, that's fine, anything. And then I was walking upstairs to get this cereal meal ready because that was convenient for me. And as I was walking up the stairs, I had this thought about doing something special for him. Now, where do you think that thought came from? Think I just generated it in and of myself? Oh, no. Every good gift and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father. And I was walking up our stairs to go into the kitchen, and I had the thought, make something special for your husband. So I walked into the kitchen. What am I going to do? I only have a half hour. How do I make a meal? And I want to tell you, in 30 minutes, I had a gourmet meal on the table.
Amen.
Hot food, homemade fresh pizza, for one of the things. And in that process, I found such joy in my heart. That was the most joy I've ever had making a pizza, because my motive was to do something special for my husband because I love him. And that little thought of kindness went a big way. And so not only did I make the pizza meal with some special garden veggies that were all sauteed really nicely, I put placemats and candles and ran over the living room and put music on. And then I went to when everything was all set and ready to go, I went to the office phone upstairs where I sit at the desk. And I hit that little intercom button and I said, honey, your meal's ready. And he came upstairs expecting to find cereal and toast and fruit. And we had candlelight, and it was so nice. And it was such a wonderful meal.
It was wonderful, especially with you.
And I just share that because once we do those little acts, once we're willing to just allow God to give us a better idea, the desire in our heart grows. A couple days later, it was the same thing. I wasn't cognizant of the time, and sure enough, it was 1:30 again. And I wanted to run the cereal whole routine by, I didn't ask him what he wanted. I was just going to do the cereal routine. The Lord just put it in my heart. Do something special for him. Cultivate kindness. That's what it says. Love is kind. Doesn't seek its own. Is not easily provoked. But it seeks the good of the one that you care for.
We want to challenge you tonight. These are not complicated principles, but they work if we allow them to work, if we cooperate with God in these. Are you willing to ask God to put it in your heart to do something to cultivate kindness before you go to bed tonight? Because if you will, you'll find out how easily God can begin to change you. And if two people will do something kind for each other, it's wonderful. And you know what I found out in my marriage? I cannot outgive my wife. Can't do it. I used to try to extract things from her in our early marriage because I was selfish. Now I find the more I give to my wife, I can never outgive my wife. And that's the way God designs it. Everything in God's creation receives to give. And man tries to mess that up. Man wants to get. No, it is truly more blessed to give. Cultivate a kindness tonight before you go to bed, and then begin to cultivate this. Number 2, the next solution for respect and restraint. Be determined never to injure the other person by your attitudes, by your words, or even through your passions. Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. I remember one evening, family time in our home was very special. We travel all over the world. We're very busy. We could be on the phone almost continually, and we love the ministry that God has called us to, but we love our family, and that's our first mission field.
Amen.
And we have learned that there's a gospel order in ministering for the Lord. It starts between a man and his God, a man and his wife, a man and his children, and then his family to the wider circle. And many, many people get that mixed up today in their business life, in their church life. But we found that if we will really give that time to God first, if we will allow ourselves to then give that time to our family, that God will protect and bless our families. We have a 22-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old daughter, and a 17-year-old son. And I tell you, friends, you can't put a price on having the hearts of your children in today's society.
Amen.
To have young people that love and honor their parents is, you can't put a value on that. Well, family time for us is very special. We make time for the family. And so this particular evening, we had a request that came in earlier in the day for what we would consider a genuine need. And the people, the only time they had was during our family time. So we talked together. We told them, okay, that's fine. You know, we'll take some time and we'll talk to you at this time this evening. Well, that call came in, and we had agreed that we would keep it simple. We would keep it to the principles that were related to their situation, and then we would come back to our family time. Well, the call came in, and we shared the things that we felt God had given us that addressed their situation, and I thought we were finished. I thought it was great. Had a good conversation, and we were ready to get off the phone. Well, my wife wasn't ready to get off the phone. And I realized it, so I just gracefully bowed out of the conversation, said my goodbyes, and I'm down at my desk in the room, down in our bedroom. So as soon as I got off the phone, I had this thought. Well, I'll just go upstairs. My wife was up in our little ministry area upstairs that we have in our living room. I'll just go upstairs, and when I get to the top of the stairs, I'll make eye contact with her, and I'll give her this sign. Cut. Okay, this is kind of a universal sign. I'll just give her that sign, and she'll get off the phone. Well, I was walking up the stairs, and between the bottom of the stairs and the top, the Spirit called to me. And remember that we need to look at being determined never to injure the one that we love with our attitudes, our words, our passions. And as I'm walking up the stairs, the Lord called to my heart and called to me when I got to the top of the stairs, when I got her attention, to just smile at her. Just smile. Not give her the cut sign. Between the bottom of the stairs and the top, I made a decision to give the Lord that choice. And He gave me the power to live it out.
Amen.
There's power in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it works in the simple, everyday things of life. And so at the top of the stairs, I had fully surrendered myself to the Lord. I was fully engaged to do His will. Not my will, but Thy will be done. When I met the eyes of my wife, I just smiled. A real smile. Did you like that?
Well, yes, I did. In fact, as I heard him coming up the stairs, I had this thought, I might be getting the cut sign, like get off the phone type thing, in a nice way, because I had agreed that we would keep it short, and I was the one continuing on the conversation. And when I heard him stop at the top of the stairs and not hear him walk across the room, of course that caught my attention. And so I turned around and I looked at him, and there was such a beautiful smile on his face. And I knew that I had total freedom. And I knew that he was in full support, that he was not going to be bothered or that I was still on the phone, but that he was just happy for me to be there as long as I wanted to be. And that was a tremendous encouragement to me. And you know what it did? It motivated me to get off the telephone. Because I wanted to spend time. I wanted to hurry up and get over there and be with this man who was that caring and that sensitive. Men, if you want your wife to respond to you, treat her with tenderness and be determined never to injure her by your attitudes, even your silent signals, your passions, your words. And wives, let us be determined never to injure our spouse by our attitudes, by our passions, by our reactions, and by our words. Watch well our words, because we're told that life and death are in the power of the tongue. And we want to use our tongues to create life and beauty and blessing in our home and our marriage relationships.
Learn to respect your spouse and restrain emotions and words that might be hurtful. The definitions of respect are regard with pleasure, look favorably upon, esteem with real worth. A definition of restraint is, I will hold back or hinder any action or emotion that will have a negative influence in the relationship. Learn to restrain those things that are hurtful. Do not allow emotions, words, reactions, and body language be hurtful to your spouse. Do not use your children to get what you want, or use them to solve your problems. By doing so, you are allowing your children to be a wedge between your spouse and yourself. 2 solutions for respect and restraint. Cultivate a spirit of kindness, and be determined to never injure the other person by your attitudes, by your words, or even through your passions.
You know, these principles that we're sharing, they're simple, godly, practical principles. But Jesus said, if you know these things, happy are ye if you what? Do them. You see, it's in the surrender, it's in the willingness that we have to allow these principles to become a living reality in us, that we can learn as husbands and wives to have true respect and restraint. Mm-hmm. God will give us the grace to do it. We just need to give him the willingness to cooperate. In closing, we'd like to share a special song with you. It's called Yours Forever. And our daughter Alane will accompany us on the piano.
When the sun is shining bright,
I'll be yours forever.
when you face the darkest night,
We will face it together.
through the good times I'll be there, clinging warmly to your hand. When there's no one else to care, I'll be there to understand. Yours forever, only yours. I'll be yours forever. Yours forever, only yours. God has brought us together. On the wings of love you came, then you taught me how to fly. Through the years it will be the same. I'll be yours forever. When I look into your eyes,
I can see us together.
there will be no sad goodbyes.
As our love blossoms sweeter,
There's a place inside my heart I know only you can fill. Until death will never part, you're the keeper of my heart. Yours forever, only yours. I'll be yours forever. Yours forever, only yours. God has brought us together.
fly. Through these it will be the same. I'll be yours forever.
Father in heaven, Lord, we need to be yours forever in order to be forever with the one you've called us to be with. I pray, Father, that each one of us will allow you to have your way in our lives as you speak to us personally, privately, in our own hearts tonight. I pray that each one of us will make the commitment to allow you to have your way and your will. As you want to not just save our marriages, Lord, not just to give us a tolerance, but you'll give us a love that we've never known, a respect and restraint within our marriage that will be a blessing. So, Lord, we thank you for the call of your Spirit. And I pray, Lord, that each one of us here will allow you to have us so that we can have a marriage heart to heart. In Jesus' name, amen.
The Marriage Heart to Heart Seminar is available on DVD and VHS. For more information, please contact Restoration International at 888-446-8844 or by visiting www.restoration-international.org. You can also find out more about the family camp meetings, check the speaking schedule, see other products available, learn more about the speakers, and even listen to audio presentations on various subjects.